market's certainly taking in stride, and that's probably appropriate. Certainly Trump land will not convict the president, but there's some new wild cards now, and it was quite a day, as you say, when the market, is crowning a new reigning bull at the very same time that, and reaching new intraday highs at the very same time that, the president's fixer and former campaign chairman are both pleading guilty to 8 counts. So I think Cohen's the more interesting question for Wall Street because he pled guilty. We didn't have a full court trial, so we don't know exactly what evidence he has. And the risk there would be that he could absolutely cooperate with Mueller. And he's got, a former Hillary Clinton fixer, Lanny Davis, out essentially saying that he wants to cooperate and have some interesting information. So, the left, the bloggers on the left, the social media, they're just enthralled because they're absolutely convinced this guarantees that we'll have a serious impeachment drive. Certainly, the liberals and progressives are more energized coming out of this. But for the street, it does something we warned about a week or so ago, and that, the markets had been very sanguine about a number of things, the Mueller trial, on all the evidence he's putting together, but also on the trade issue. I think they've become very insulated, if not quite okay with the president's gambit, willing to give him a great deal of leeway. And then the concerns about a government shutdown and a border wall funding issue, all those were settling in quite well, and now I think they have to worry about tail risk in September, and that's just when the markets and voters begin to focus on the elections after Labor Day.
Well, Chuck, I think it's going to be a noisy September, and I guess even looking beyond that, then what might all of this mean as you look ahead to the midterms? As you said, come September, the voters are going to start to pay attention, the markets will start to pay attention to what the voters are thinking. How do you think this plays out in November?
Well, I think September will be very important, Michelle, because, again, the markets already assume that the House is probably going to go Democratic. And this will probably help that cause. Certainly, I think the left will be more energized coming out of this. It's interesting, this buried the news of a Republican congressman who should have been saved, Duncan Hunter in San Diego, pleading guilty to fraud, putting yet another Republican seat at risk. The bigger risk is that if we have a really bad September and the president, you have to worry about the president's counter response. Might he pardon one of these two individuals? Might he actually bank hard on trade again or the border wall funding just to divert attention? As you know, he likes to dominate news cycles. And as September goes, could become the issue of whether this actually reaches some of those hard to get places like North Dakota, Missouri, Indiana, Florida, Tennessee, where the Senate is going to be decided. And if the Senate is seen at risk after Labor Day, the markets are going to have a lot more to discount because the Trump agenda is very much more at risk.
Chuck, granting all those political implications, if you kind of follow the chain down, I'm struggling to figure out what the market would be attempting to price in and discount, even if you follow it down that line of a serious impeachment proceeding under a Democratic House, mainly because what is the forward-going Trump administration economic agenda, right? It's hardline on trade. You got the tax cuts in the books. You have this new regulatory approach. So I wonder, a year ago, people were worried about this, a lot of this appearance of the president being in jeopardy because the tax bill wasn't passed yet. So what right now are we trying to price?
Yeah, it's interesting, Mike. I heard you say earlier that it just feels like we might be closer to a top. And it just adds an additional, element of risk. And again, if it is serious evidence that the president and Michael Cohen, willfully violated federal campaign finance laws, then it becomes a much more serious problem. But other than that, we're just heading more knowingly towards a likely Democratic House and an effort towards impeachment. But nevertheless, the Senate probably remaining narrowly Republican, the president's agenda remaining intact, the markets being, increasingly comfortable with the idea of the president really focusing more on China and moving towards bilateral deals with, Canada and Mexico and the EU nations. So I'm with you that markets shouldn't overreact, investors shouldn't overreact at this point. But again, this is some additional sort of tail risk that was not really on the screen, and particularly the notion of Republicans possibly losing the Senate. If we have a really bad September, we think that's the bit of a deal breaker that could help to cause a bit of a correction.